Hi, I'm Rick Bleiweiss, author of �ꬃ𝐭 and Scorpion and the Barbershop Detectives, and I'm here today with a very special person, Andrew Gulli, who is the managing editor of the Strand Mystery Magazine, which is a quarterly magazine that offers fabulous stories, previously unpublished works by literary giants such as Steinbeck and Hemingway and Louisa May Alcott and Raymond Chandler, and new works by today's best-selling authors, including R.L. Stine and Michael Connelly, Deaver, and many others. And recently, there has been a book published by Blackstone called The Strand Magazine, Best of Strand Magazine, and it features stories by many of those authors, including Jo Nesbø, Michael Connelly, Ruth Ware, Walter Mosley, Joyce Carol Oates, and many others. And it's a fabulous looking package, I must say. So, hi, Andrew.
Hi, Rick. Good to see you.
Same here. Thanks for joining me today. So, for people, first of all, let me say that Andrew is the managing editor of Strand Magazine, and his sister, Lamia, is the fiction editor. And Lamia was going to join us today, but unfortunately she couldn't make it. So, Andrew will hold down the fort. And so, tell anybody who's watching that doesn't really know what's the history of Strand Magazine? Because I know it goes back a long ways, and then you revived it. So what's the whole story there?
Well, the history is a rather interesting story. It was started in the 1890s by a very wealthy English entrepreneur who ended up selling a vegetarian restaurant to fund the start of this magazine called The Strand. So as you can imagine, he was way ahead of his time by even launching a vegetarian restaurant in a meat and potatoes type of an era like Victorian England. So we'll probably be getting comments from people saying, no, actually, vegetarian restaurants are quite the thing in London in 1890. In fact, I went to one, but but anyway, so he started the magazine, and then within a few months, he ended up getting a submission from Arthur Conan Doyle of a Sherlock Holmes story, and the Sherlock Holmes became synonymous with the Strand. In fact, when Arthur Conan Doyle had briefly killed Sherlock Holmes off, all the staff members of the Strand went into the office with black armbands because they felt that it was going to be over for them, and it did hurt the magazine, but Conan Doyle did the right thing and brought Sherlock Holmes back, and he was publishing Sherlock Holmes stories like for the next 25 quarter century. The Strand also published Agatha Christie, Winston Churchill, P.G. Wodehouse, Graham Greene, D.H. Lawrence. So they had a great lineup of writers. And then after World War II, paper prices went up and the economy was in kind of a free fall. So they had to close shop in 1950.
Okay. And now let's fast forward to how did you get involved with it and when and what did you do?
Well, I was a big collector of the magazine, and it was just like a thing that and you're very young and you take a risk on things, you get an opportunity, you don't think 10 steps ahead like I would be thinking right now. So I will just tell you very frankly and directly, if this position was offered to me, if I had this opportunity over again, like right now, I would be thinking, okay, so what about this? And then what about that? I'm like, okay, I think I'm gonna go and uh, become an accountant. Cash in every April. Because as you can probably imagine, when you have a magazine, you have many sleepless nights from all the stress and aggravation, but also from deadlines. And I'd be very happy having those few sleepless nights in April. But anyway, I digress. Uh, so we brought it back in 1998. And, originally we were thinking it was just had to be, nothing to do with Sherlock Holmes. It had to just be this literary slash mystery type of a magazine. And I remember talking to Maxim Jakubowski, who's a famous anthologist, writer. Uh, he ran Murder One bookstore in London, which was the biggest mystery bookstore in England.
Okay.
And he said, if you publish Sherlock Holmes stories, we'll boost our order from 5 to 50.
Oh,
And when you're a startup, that's significant. I said,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But actually, we're going to do that from the beginning. Like the 50 magazines. Uh, so, and then when we started out, we were very, very lucky in that, we had great submissions by authors who were quite well known. In fact, I remember opening up an envelope and there was a short story from Henry Slessor.
Really.
If anybody's familiar with the old Alfred Hitchcock Presents, he probably wrote a dozen of them and was a fantastic short story writer. I could not believe my eyes. Henry Slessor submitting to this new magazine. And then I remember a couple of weeks later opening the P.O. box, and then I see a envelope from James Salas.
Wow.
I just wanted to bring Jim up because he passed away a few days ago. And he was a consummate gentleman in the world of mysteries. He was always approachable, always generous, always funny, had this kind of a cynical point of view of publishing, but in a good-natured way. I remember him saying, "Oh, when I started out in the 60s, they said publishing is tough. And wow, fast forward 30 years later, let me tell you something. I can't imagine things that are so difficult as they are now." Every time I have a setback, like everybody has setbacks in publishing, Rick, you know it.
Yeah,
I'm always
absolutely.
remembering what Jim said. So, in essence, Jim is living in my mind for the past 28 years because I'm always remembering when he said, "Oh, did we think we had it tough?"
So when you started the magazine up again, did you have to license it from the estate of the original owner, or how did you acquire the rights to the magazine?
That's a very good point. We had to go to a copyright lawyer, and I remember going to all these lawyers, and I was thinking, my goodness, all the legal groundwork. I don't know if there's going to be money left for a magazine. Like everything happens with lawyers. I have many lawyers are friends. God bless them. But,
Yes.
you know, charging by the minute, that's something. So I was looking and I was saying to myself, oh my God, okay, what are we going to do now after we pay all these lawyers just to tell us we can do something? And how about if we have to pay them to tell us we can't do something? That
Right.
can get a lot of egg on your face if that happens. So I did some research and I found a company called Thompson and Thompson. And I don't know if they probably are still around, but at that time, you had to go in to their website, you had to do a search for trademark, and you can see if the trademark had dissolved, or you could see if the trademark was available. And at that time, we had 0.56 KB. I think it's a minute. Maybe you know that little more than I do about that, but it was dial up. So yeah, if you and I had this conversation, we would be like pixels with moving with
Yes.
mouths moving in slow motion. So that's what life was like then. I'm sounding like one of these people. Life 30 years ago.
No, it was though.
It was,
Commodore,
and I'm telling
Commodore, those
anybody,
kind of
it
things.
was. You had to dial in, hear the sound of a fax machine,
Yeah.
and you were very content with 56 KB per minute. So
Yeah.
56 KB per minute what had that spinning circle round and round and round and round. And I remember thinking to myself, I must be getting some atrial fibrillation because just feeling this heartbeat in my head and my chest, and it just going round and round and round. And then finally it said zero, zero there's zero uh, registrations for the Strand magazine. So I knew we would be able to trademark it, which we did. And that was another kind of a do-it-yourself thing where we just said, okay, why pay the lawyer the extra $1,000? Let's just go to
Right.
Borders bookstore. And that's another thing you and I are going to have nostalgia about, Rick. Borders bookstore where
Oh, yeah.
they had everything under the sun was there. I mean,
Yeah.
it felt like a library. There were books that I'm 100% sure they never ever sold. I mean, you could get a book about kings and philosophers or the history of Cyprus or the history of Hungary. And I was a weird kid, so I'd get all those crazy books. So I think I kept them in business. And we bought a book about how to register a trademark, and we just did it ourselves. And
Cool.
you know, we cut out the middleman. So that was, yeah, that was in essence a type of model we had, and we've tried to carry it on of just doing, making sure the product is a great product, making sure the material in the product is great, and having a professionalism with the product, a professionalism with our customer service, but also having that point of view of going off of the beaten path at times. Because, I mean, I'll give you another example. You
Please.
know, I understood early on from seeing how magazines had started to decline when we had started. And I just said, okay, we have to make up our mind, you know. Are we going to try to pivot? Are we going to try to have the perspective of let's just have the magazine and the website and our focus be a hub to bring people to buy other stuff, not just magazines. So
Okay.
that's why we've manufactured calendars, pens, we t-shirts, coffee mugs. The website has 2,500 products there
Wow.
from books, and they're very, very well curated. And that to me was a monumental decision that we had made, and that was just to not be that everyday type of magazine. Because I remember there was a very nice gentleman named 𝐸𝐿𝐻𝐼, and he's known as Mr. Magazine.
Okay.
And I think he's in Mississippi or Alabama, and he would write like a list of all the new magazines that were being published, and he featured us as one of the most notable magazines of the year. And Samir, if
Wow.
you're out there, thank you.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
equally, he would just cite the statistics of new startups. And in 1998, they were very, 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 very grim. Uh, and 90% of all magazines would not survive the year. 99% would not survive 5 years.
Wow.
I think they stopped counting at 10.
Well, you beat the odds, my man.
We did. It's we'll celebrate our 30th anniversary in about 22 months.
Cool. Now, over that course of time from when it started to now, has the magazine changed in any way? Or has it stayed true to a specific course you set for it with no deviations?
That's a good point. I mean, we've always we I remember talking to my uncle years ago about something, and we had just launched a new website and it had all these great bells and whistles, and you know, it was just I would say it was the most glamorous mystery magazine or one of the most glamorous magazine websites I've seen. Probably not in the top 10, I would say from 10 to 20. It had all sorts of great things going. And I just looked and I saw the sales had just suddenly, boom, dropped completely. And
Wow.
I remember having coffee with my uncle about it, and he said, Andrew, you forgot marketing 101. When you have a set group of customers, if you shock them, you lose them. And
Right.
always introduce a change gradually. And what we've done for the past 28 years is we've pivoted at times, we've changed, we've done things that are a little offbeat, not to be that predictable, but we've never shocked our people into just completely changing things around completely. And the thing is, at times you'll have highs, you'll have lows, there'll be peaks, there'll be dips, there'll be highs, and where you're celebrating and high-fiving each other. But at the end of the day, you just have to trust what you're doing, believe in what you're doing,
Yeah.
and have the bravery to make some changes, but not to make drastic changes. In fact, I remember there was a talk show. This was when I was, I think, 12 years old, and it was started by the man who hosted Wheel of Fortune, 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭.
Oh yeah.
And it was a pretty good talk show. And I remember he was struggling with the ratings, so he just suddenly said, "Okay, now we're gonna make it an hour." And then he just changed how the studio looked. And he was just doing so many different things because his initial idea didn't catch on that I, as a kid who was my mom and my dad were very, very loyal to him, said, "Okay, we're changing the channel." And that taught me a very, very and he ended up getting canceled or quitting or whatever. But that taught me a very, very pivotal lesson in that you have to have faith in what you're doing. And if you pivot, you need to just veer a little, but not stray far. And we've done the same thing of fiction. Uh, Sometimes we'll publish an essay, book reviews. The only thing we've added has been DVD reviews. And I would say we're now a little more ready to do things that are experimental. Like we published a story by Paul Theroux before it was released in an anthology. And I would say it had like a little bit of crime in it. But we're now saying to ourselves, okay, if we're giving people 5 stories, let's do one thing that's a little unusual. Let's do one thing that's a little off the beaten path. And to me, that's a joy of having the independence of not working for a Fortune 500 company like Condé Nast, although I probably would like the great healthcare premiums.
Amen. So for anybody that has never picked up Strand Magazine, just your version, describe it. You just said there are 5 stories. What would they find in a given issue?
Okay, well, I'll say it's glossy, it's full color, it's printed on good paper. It's not printed on ultra glossy paper because, in fact, we had another discussion about this, and we found that older readers or readers who are disturbed by glare will have an issue with that. So instead, it's not on newsprint, but it's on a matte type of a paper that's white, but just has very good differentiation between blacks and white, the white background of the page. Uh, it's about 64 pages. The cover always has very fine artwork and oil paintings. That's our trademark
Right.
because other magazines will have a photo of a famous person. And when I have magazines in my basement with photos of famous people, it just doesn't feel classic. It just feels like something of like, oh, okay. Oh, that feels rather dated. Or I just met that person.
Got it.
Yeah, they're wearing this double-breasted suit. Nobody's wearing a double-breasted suit
Right.
anymore.
So where do you
But
get the paintings from?
well, we contact artists and we'll talk to them and say, hey, we'd like to include your artwork and we'll give you a great credit in the magazine. And artists are always very forthcoming about that. And that's our trademark. And that sets us apart from other magazines that do not have that collector's coffee book table feel.
Right.
Uh, and then the other thing is when they open the magazine, they'll see 4 or 5 or 6 short stories, 2 interviews with authors. It could be an actor, book reviews, DVD reviews. We've interviewed everybody from Paul Giamatti to Michael Connelly to Peter Ustinov and Christopher Lee. So it's a very, very mixed group. And we always make sure to keep the interviews lively, to keep them fun. They're never formulaic, and they're
Right.
definitely not confrontational. It's not like the McLaughlin group or Mike Wallace.
So has there been one or more interviews where you would point to and go, "Oh, those were absolutely my favorites," or do you not want to embarrass anybody by not
In fact,
including any of that?
I will say this. I mean, I've had a few interviews that I have to say, frankly, were very, very difficult. I mean, it was just, you know, very difficult to get the best out of the person. And the odd thing is this. Sometimes you'll see some of the nicest people that will be the most sacrificing, generous, most wonderful writers. And when you speak to them one on one,
Yeah.
they can be a little reserved and a little reserved to the point where you're just like sweating inside and saying, "Oh my God, when is this going to end? And what is this going to take to have a little bit of a spark?" And then you have other people who are interview darlings, but in real life, they just, they're the person at the cocktail party looking for the next person to talk to. Oh, you're reviewing my book. I'll see you later. Bye. But if I were to tell you my favorite interview, and it's not because he's a big acting celebrity, it would be Paul Giamatti,
Okay, cool.
because he has read more fiction and more classical mystery fiction than anybody I know.
Really?
I don't know if he's read much. I pride myself like in reading thousands of books. This guy is just a fanatic.
Wow.
When I want something good to read, I'll email him.
It's interesting because obviously Giamatti's name has come up many times since I'm now publishing Rex Pickett, who, and his Sideways
Yeah.
series. But I've never met Giamatti personally. But that's interesting what you're telling me. I had no idea he was that much of a reader.
He's a fanatic. I mean, he is a classic crime fanatic. I mean, he's
Wow.
read if I name a book, he'll be like, "Oh yeah, I know that. I read that when I was 12 or 15." Oh my God, this guy's amazing. I mean, he said he takes like a suit when he travels to make a film. He has his suitcase with his clothes, all his belongings, personal belongings for travel, and then he has another suitcase that just has books.
Wow.
He said
Wow.
it's just filled with books. In
It's a
fact,
kind
he said he acts to be able to afford books because he said if yeah, that's how his habit of reading is. But that I would say was probably one of the best interviews that I've done. The other a few others that stand out, and it's so funny how there are two actors was Peter Ustinov,
oh,
and that
okay.
was because he just was so funny and throwing out imitations. And then an interesting interview was one that was done by email, and that was with Len Deighton.
Oh, I'm less familiar with Len Dayton. I know who.
He's like one of the two kings of the Cold War espionage novel, and one is John
Okay.
le Carré, who's
Yes.
just very, much more famous than Len Deighton, but not as nice as Len because Len is the best person around. And he's usually like the most reserved person around. And I would contact his agents. They would be like, he's traveling and he can't do it for the foreseeable future. And I just was very persistent until I found, you know, uh, a diagonal way of reaching Len Deighton. And I ended up getting a 7,000 word interview.
Wow.
It was one of the best interviews we've ever, the most in-depth interviews. It was a wonderful interview, and I urge anybody who's interested in spy novels and espionage novels, and also some historical books about World War II, to pick up Len Deighton because I think he's very, very underrated. He's about 95 now. He's still around. Knock on wood. Keep going, Len. We love you, and I hope he gets back and starts writing another book because I think he's incredible. I think, of the two authors between Le Carré and Len Deighton, I would say that Le Carré started strongly, uh, and I would say that Dayton started just in a very predictable way. But if you look at the last 10 books that Len Dayton wrote and compared it to the last 10 books that John Le Carré wrote, I think Dayton surpassed him. But, you know, I don't think many readers think that. And the interesting thing is that he was not as active after the Cold War,
Oh,
whereas Le Carré was just writing till he passed away.
yeah. So speaking of that, for this book, The Best Of, how did you go about choosing what you wanted in the book?
A
Uh,
lot of editorial fights happened about that. It's like clashing with Lemmy. It's like, okay, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. In fact, there was like I don't know if you've seen there's a sitcom, Frasier, and the two brothers are deciding about who they're going to invite to a party, and then one of them says, "Okay, every time I want to veto something, I'll put like a black ball in the cup." And they're just sitting and negotiating over, who they're going to invite to a party, and even being very strategic about it. It's like, "Oh, I want to invite so and so." No, I'm stopping that. He's like, "But you like that person." Like, well, if you let this person in, I won't let this in. So, uh, I was kidding around with her the other day, and I said, "Oh my God, that's just like that episode." But but kidding aside, it was just this when you put a book together, and I was not as effective mentally about this as she was. I was thinking, okay, I like this, I like this, I like these 18 stories, these are non-negotiable. And she just very wisely said, okay, so it's going to be an anthology about capers and people who will make very bad decisions. Is this what you want? I said, oh, I think you got it. I just have one aesthetic, and I want the whole book to be in part of that aesthetic. So the next part came with, how do you balance things out? How do you make it something that's just not going to be about people drowning? In fact, when we were working on the TOC, when she was working on the TOC, she said, "Oh, look, three of the stories involve people drowning in water. What are we going to do?" So it's like, okay, let's put something funny in between, or put a hard-boiled PI story in between. And that's how the book was put together, not as, all the most famous and illustrious people who wrote for the Strand. Many people were left out. It was just put together with a balance. And we just said to ourselves, okay, do we want this to be just all about detective stories, all about crime stories? Or at the end of the day, do we want this to have what an average five magazines would look like? And an average five magazines would have everything from a ghost story, something funny, PI, noir, a regular old short story. And that's how we came upon the decision, just to not to steer away from the theme anthology, and just have it as the best representation of what the magazine is about.
Well, good. So let me ask you about the magazine in that regard. Um, so you, I'm assuming you get a lot of feedback from your readers. Is that correct? And is that
It
mostly
is.
come through your website?
It is. We get it through the website. In fact, once I remember I was working late in the office, and I remember actually I shared an office in a complex with a bunch of insurance actuaries. So it was kind of interesting to hear the talk about, like, you know, hey, this person's blood pressure went up a couple of 5 points. Better boost the premium by a couple of bucks. Anyway, so I remember I would hear these discussions, and when I'd be walking down the hallway a few times. But anyway, I remember I was staying in late, and I just lifted up the phone, and there was I think a gentleman originally from Russia, and he said, uh, "I want to complain. Whoever is publishing this new editor, they need to fire him." Said, okay, Mr. K. So, and he's like, "No, everything is dark. I like fun English mysteries." And I said, "Okay, you know what?" I said, "I'm the editor." It's like, "Oh, they should fire you."
That's
That
funny.
was that was humbling, but I just looked and I said, "Okay, let's take this constructive or destructive criticism back," and said, "Okay, let's just put some more British things in the mixer, because maybe unconsciously we've veered away from the golden age. Let's bring that back." So we've made the conscious decision to just say, "Okay, let's have some of these classic Agatha Christie type stories in the magazine." We get people emailing us, we get people messaging us on Facebook. The It's always so wonderful to get somebody saying something great, because, as you probably know, people are often going to complain before they'll say something positive. I think the ratio probably with customer service is, for every 20 complaints, I'll get one compliment. I can be a bit of a complainer, so that's why I'm always balancing it out. by if I get any customer service, I set like a couple of days during the year to like on my stationery, write a letter to a manager, write a letter to a hotel, write an email and just say, look, I had such great customer service because I know how that can make somebody's day. And the
Oh,
interesting thing is this, Rick. It's been an interesting time the last 6 years with various things in life happening plus COVID. So it's not been the easiest time for anybody in the world. Just seeing
right.
a lot of what we all saw during lockdown, during, before, after. And at times I've gotten, looked in the email, gotten something. Somebody said, "Oh, I opened up a copy of the magazine and it made my day and it was so fun and so wonderful." And you just realize like how that really makes what you're doing worthwhile.
Yes.
How no matter how many people will listen to an NPR story about the magazine and will buy the magazine. And okay, sales are wonderful. Nobody ever, is going to turn their nose on good sales and good things happening. But when you see somebody who feels that they were touched by work that you did,
Oh,
it
yeah.
feels so wonderful. It could just take a bad day and just set you on a whole new trajectory.
Oh, I totally agree. And unfortunately, the offset to that is we also live in an age where there are trolls out there who seem to think that their job is to be negative about everything in life.
Trust me, we have these trolls also. We have just, there are just all sorts of people who are keyboard warriors. And in my view, if you're going to be nasty to a person's face or just
Yeah.
hate somebody the old-fashioned way. Get to know them well enough.
So tell me, in today's day and age, talking about today's day and age, what are your sales digitally versus physically?
Well, the interesting thing is we have a very limited digital edition of the magazine. I would say it's probably 15%, but I would say looking back at the whole thing, uh, a majority of things are via the website, mailing lists. I would say newsstand sales are about 20% of that. It
Okay.
was when there was Borders, it was like about 35%. And then Borders went out of business. And as you can imagine, Barnes and Noble at that point started to contract. Now the good news is, and I hope it's good news, that they're seem to be off to the races, opening about 40 or 60 bookstores a year.
Yep.
Though I did chat with an academic, he's a scholar and a good friend of mine, and he said that, I don't know if this is his theory, but he said that Barnes and Noble's doing better because they bought up a lot of college bookstores.
Oh,
So
okay.
college books are much more pricey than,
Yeah.
books you and I sell.
Yes.
So they're
Yes.
probably boosting their profit on that. So I hope that they're doing well. I hope all bookstores are doing well because books are wonderful. Reading is a wonderful pursuit.
Oh, absolutely. I must tell you, though, I'm a little, I want to say surprised that the digital number isn't higher in today's day and age. I mean, congratulations that you've still got a great print business. I mean, that's really cool.
Yeah, what we're working on doing now is this. This is one of our goals for this year, and that's to have a digital protected magazine that people can purchase on the website.
Cool.
Something that is not easy to copy from. Once we start that, I know people will just love that instant gratification. But we
Yes.
want to make sure, like everything we do, that we do it right. I mean, we've had prototypes and people are looking like, okay, let's see, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in. Okay, let's take my glasses off. So we want to make sure it's not that it's a user-friendly experience and not that feeling whereby people will be saying, "Oh, okay, the Strand Magazine really struck out with that one."
Got it. So, did you always know you wanted to be a magazine publisher, or did you want to be a writer, or did you have some other path in life and it just veered into magazine publishing or editing? What got you to where you are?
I wanted to actually to be a basketball player, but being 4'8" at age 14 showed me that that was not going to be the path. And it's no disrespect to Spud Webb or Muggsy Bogues, but that's what my main thing was because I was a good outside shooter. Thank goodness I grew a foot from age 14 to 18.
Right.
So, but that still is not going to bring me,
No,
you know,
no.
a contract with the Detroit Pistons or the Cleveland Cavaliers. But I wanted to be a writer too. To me, writing and reading, I was a big reader from when I was a kid. I would dictate stories on cassette tapes. So that was my path. And you just read about how writing was such a difficult career, and I just was never confident enough in my work. So maybe I'm the cliche of the person who never made it in writing who gets into publishing.
I wouldn't call you a cliche. I would call you a success.
But it makes me sympathetic to people. I
Yeah,
mean, I've dealt with agents who can be nasty about things and editors and writers who you hear all sorts of sad, and tough stories about writers who can be editors who can be rather contemptuous of writers, especially if they feel that they need work done or if they feel that their sales aren't good or whatever. But I've always looked and I've said to myself, writing is the ultimate thing of one of the ultimate things of putting yourself out there. So you have to let people know what they need to do to fix their work. But there's nothing more humbling than somebody who's just, getting there. It's a humbling experience if somebody's cutting your work down into bits, and it just feels like they're cutting you down into
yeah.
bits.
Well, to some degree, though, that comes with the territory at times.
It does. It does. I mean, sometimes you see writers, famous and not so famous making the same mistakes. And what I really do have a kind of a pet peeve about sometimes is some of the greats you can see from going into bookstore are no longer being edited. And I'm not resentful of that because it's getting my brothers in the editing union out of a job. No, we don't have a union. We should actually. But it's just for the reader and the writer and the writer's legacy, whereby, no writer is great enough not to have an editor tell them how to make their work better.
You're absolutely right. Yes.
And sometimes you see works and you're saying to yourself, "Oh my goodness, the ego has gotten in the way of the once talented person." It doesn't happen all the time. It happens sometime, but sometimes one time is too many, especially when there are people who, when you look at their early work, and you look at a new work and you're thinking, what happened?
Yeah. Well, I've signed books by a number of authors and the vast majority are really looking forward to working with an editor and making their books be the best they can be. But then there have been, as you're describing, a few who say, my words are sacrosanct. There is no way anybody's changing them. And they are really difficult to work with because
I
they're
know. The
usually
thing about
wrong.
it is, I know the thing about it is the wonderful thing about books is that if a book gets published, if a book doesn't get published, nobody's going to die. It's not like a person's performing surgery and you can
Right.
paralyze a person or kill a person. The great thing about our business is that most of the time the stakes are not very, very high.
Right.
And maybe that's why the reward isn't that much either.
Yeah, it's possible. So, what about AI? What do you think about that? And will you ever be publishing AI generated stories? And what do you see in that in terms of the publishing and writing world?
Well, the thing about it is I have a lot of excitement about it. We won't be publishing something with AI because, AI I would describe it as something that can generate something that won't be unique. And if you publish an AI story, you can hear that your competitor or another magazine's published the exact same thing. It's not as much as I want to give humans opportunities before computers because we're living in a world where it's feeling like we're all very disconnected from each other. In terms of my experiences with I would say it's very good for quick research. It's very good if you're looking at a sentence, trying to think how to make it better. It's quicker. It's sure as heck quicker than I am in giving me 10 options on how to deal with a sentence that's really troubling me, and sometimes better even. When you flood it with too much data, that's when you see that it starts making mistakes. And it starts making almost these mistakes of somebody who's quite hangry or being passive aggressive. So that is my big problem with AI. I think it could be something that is very exciting when you if it's used in little nuggets, little passages. But from what I'm seeing in AI, and probably I'll be eating my words, I don't think any of us will be out of a job because of it.
Yeah, I think you may be right about that in terms of public. I don't know. Right now, I'm going to books rather than magazines. The last count I heard was last year there were 4 million books published. Um, AI is going to start generating more and more books. So you've got self-published authors, you'll have AI authors, and then you'll have traditionally published and hybrid published authors. And I wonder how much above 4 million it's going to go because the world can't even absorb those 4 million books. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the average book sells under 100 copies. It's going to be an interesting world. It is going to affect us, but I just don't know in to what degree.
Well, we'll know one thing that no matter what happens, James Patterson will sell millions of copies every year.
That's true.
He will
That
have that he will have that built-in audience, and I'm always happy people are reading. When I see people are reading, I'm always very, very happy. If James Patterson's selling books, that's fine, it's just the problem is that when people are not reading, it's not good for our industry. In fact, I remember years ago, I was just feeling like, what's this with this whole Da Vinci Code thing? Or what's it with this whole 50 Shades of Grey insanity? What is it? And I remember walking into an office because I was playing soccer. Again, another dream of mine that didn't happen, but I had a bad, bad knee. And I walked in and I saw one of the ladies up front reading 50 Shades of Grey. And maybe because I was in pain, I said, you can read a lot of other things better than this. You look, what? It's like,
that's
sorry, my knee's in pain. But anyway, and I remember thinking, like, why are all these people reading this book that's not that great? I didn't read it, so I'm giving an opinion without reading it, but that doesn't float my boat. And I spoke to an industry executive, and they said something very, 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 very perceptive. And they said, when Random House puts 50 Shades of Grey and it sells, even it's a book that real readers are not reading. It's a book that's just, oh, I heard about this book, or The Da Vinci Code, which was a fast moving plot. I wouldn't say it was a great book, but it sold millions. And what my industry executive friend said is they said, even if the book is not the greatest book, but if you can get 4 million people going to a bookstore buying a book, that means there's money for everybody. If
yes.
it's Random House at the end of the day, the bookstore has more money to spend. And the publishing companies, the bookstore makes more money, the distributor makes more money, share prices go up. So it's
Yeah,
always good for everybody when people are buying books.
yeah.
And the thing that's really, really concerning me is I'm not a statistical expert, but I know well enough to see that people buying books today are the demographic of 45 and up. and you start asking yourself, what will happen when a lot of people, we don't have active readers as much. If people in their below the age of 45 are not reading, and they used to read 25 years ago, and they're not as reading as much. So that's something that's really, really worrying me. So when I see a viral bestseller take off, whether it's Colleen Hoover or
Right.
any of those books that I may not read, I'm actually happy.
Well, let me ask a question though. Um, my perception could be wrong, is that younger people are reading more online, like with Kindles and iPads and things like that, or listening to audiobooks than necessarily picking up a hardcover. Um, do you think that's true or not true?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's a distinction. The indication that I've received is that and this is an interesting point you brought up, Rick. In fact, I need to step back what I said in that people from the ages of 12 to 24 are reading, and then people from age 25 to 45 are not reading as much.
Okay.
So the interesting
Yeah.
thing is we have a generational gap of a group of a 20 to 25 year range of people who are hardly reading at all. And then book reading has just become it's more of the focus of young adults and teenagers and people who are in middle age and elderly. And this is something that's very, very troubling that we're losing that group of people in their 20s, 30s, and early to mid 40s. And my explanation is perhaps people are more obsessed with their phones. Perhaps this is the time where people think that, this is my time to make money and not care about things like books. Do you have an explanation?
Yeah, I have a theory. And
Theory, actually, yeah.
yeah, and if you look at the wall behind me, you see I was in the music industry, and the music industry had a similar situation. Um, and what we discussed, which I think may be true of all entertainment, but maybe not video games, but certainly reading and listening to music, is the age group where you're talking about where people do less reading is when they are more consumed with their day-to-day lives. It's when their work is really starting and kicking off. It's when their families are being raised, and I think they're being distracted by so many other things going on in their lives. And then when you get older, there's less going on. So you've got more time to do it. When you're younger, you're kind of almost in a school situation, forced to read. So I don't know. My theory is it has to do with your life situation and so many other things taking precedence.
I think so, and I think parents today may be a little more engaged with their kids than they were a generation ago.
Quite possibly.
I think you brought up a good point because the counterpoint to that would be, okay, well, why was that generation 20 years ago reading, but this generation isn't? Or why was that generation of people taking care of their kids reading, but this generation isn't? Like, people still have to take care of kids, people still have to do these things. But I think you've hit the nail on the head in that, yeah, people do have to take care of their kids, but parenting styles have changed now than from what they were 20, 30, 40, or 50 years ago, whereby when I talk to some of my cousins with kids and some of my friends, and they're driving across the country to go to soccer tournaments, ice hockey tournaments, basketball, to all sorts of things. They're so engaged in their children's lives and they were not as engaged as they are now. And that's why reading and buying books has fallen victim to that.
But I also think that there are more ways to amuse yourself these days than there were. I mean, there weren't video games X number of years ago. And, I mean, look, when I was born, television was just coming into its own. So, I mean, there were so many different ways of being distracted and involved in various things these days, much more, I think, than there were in the past. Yeah, I mean, to me, publishing and books are a branch of entertainment. They're a specific type of entertainment, but it's still, you can go to a movie, you can listen to music, you can listen to an audiobook, you can read a book, you can play in a soccer game, you can watch television, you can play a video. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do these days, and I've just hit the tip of the iceberg.
And also, I think the phone, if you look at
Yeah,
phones like 20 years ago, we didn't have such
right.
phones. And now people feel like they have the world in the palm of their hands.
And they do.
And they do in a way, but it's not as grounding as reading a book. In fact, what I was doing was I was, putting it on a YouTube film or an audiobook before I slept. And now I'm reading before I sleep. And I'm finding reading is just so much more rewarding, and you don't get those blue light nightmares that you do if you're watching something.
I get that. So, can someone from the public who is unpublished submit to you for the magazine, or do
Yeah,
you,
they could.
and does that happen very much?
It does, and it's wonderful to publish somebody who's new. In fact, I was working on a couple of short stories last year, and I said, okay, I need to get published. I want to publish a short story. So I went to all these websites, closed to submission. For short story journals, literary journals, closed to submission. We're only open once a year or twice a year to submission, or pay to submit your story. And then, okay, I did AI on this one. I went to AI and I said, how can I find a magazine where I can submit to that isn't going to force me to write them a check or isn't
Right.
close to submissions like, where there's only an open window for a short time. And what they said was the Strand Magazine.
Really?
Yes.
That's
Eh,
great. Right on.
feeling good about myself.
Yeah, you should. That's great. So, how would someone submit to you? And what are your submission guidelines? There a word count that you have to be within, and
I mean, generally it's 3 to 5,000 words, and we have it on the website, with whereby we like a story that has a surprise ending because there has to be a good payoff. I mean, not that I don't like Anton Chekhov and all those open-ended endings.
right.
So we have all those guidelines there on right on the website, and they can email us because right now the SASE has become a thing of the past.
Yes.
So and that's it. And we've published, we've almost in every issue for the past couple of years, we've had something by a writer that we've not invited to write for the magazine, or their agents, or they didn't approach us to write a short story. And to me, I like that. I love all our writers. I love all the famous writers and not so famous writers, but there's something special about emailing somebody and making their day and letting them know that they'll be published in the magazine.
Oh yeah, definitely is. Have you is there an author you can point to where you say, I published that person first and now they've gone on to bigger things even?
Trying to think. There are a few who we published them early on, but I don't remember. In fact, I will tell you another story, and I won't name a name over here because I don't want to get in
Okay.
trouble. But there was a writer who was two writers who are very determined, and one of them just was so insistent. I would get like 4 or 5 stories from him every month. To the point I was like tuning out. Oh my,
Wow.
what is going on? Stop being obsessed with us. And it was just, I remember looking at the label and I could tell from the top of the label who it was. And, oh my God, this person won't leave us alone. And then eventually he became quite a famous writer. And there's another writer who sent us a story, and I just didn't think it was good. And she became world famous and has sold like so many books, and th those are the things you have to live with, which is wonderful about publishing. It's
Yeah,
not like I'm a judge who sent somebody to jail for 30 years and will have to
right.
live with possibly making a mistake, or a physician who made a mistake, or a lawyer who made a mistake. I mean, That's kind of as bad as it gets in the world of editing.
What do you see in the future for Strand? Uh, More of the same, and not that that's bad, because what there is quite good. But
Thank you.
what do you see? Obviously, in the recent past, you've expanded the website with all these products and everything. Do you see a next iteration or something?
Yeah, definitely. We have plans on launching a podcast this year.
Oh, cool.
Uh, and then we are going to amp up the digital part of the website where we'll have digital editions. We've expanded our blog to have its own domain, mysterycenter.com, and
Cool.
that has over 1,500 blog posts. So that's kind of the news part of the website and has all types of authors because we made the decision to launch Mystery Center because we have so many writers and publicists and agents, and they want to have a platform. They want to say something about the world of mystery writing. And you can't say yes to everybody if you have a magazine that's 64 pages, probably not even if it was 600 pages.
Right.
So the blog of mysterycenter.com has given us the chance to say not to say no to people all the time. That's the least part of my favorite job is turning anybody down. And that's getting busier. The website Mystery Center is getting more and more clicks, and we're very excited about it.
Is the website strandmagazine.com or Strand Mystery Magazine? How would people find the website?
Strandmag.com. If they go
Strandmag.com.
to Strand Magazine, I believe it has something to do with tourism in Myrtle Beach.
Oh, really?
Yes, so we've gotten some emails from people saying, "What's the matter with you people? I'm interested in mysteries, and I get this magazine that you're sending me all about tourism." Well, I think you're gonna have to call it Tourism People of the Myrtle Beach Strand Magazine.
That's funny.
So hopefully, not hopefully, but I really sound nasty when I say this. So when Strand Magazine in Myrtle Beach, when they decide to retire, if they do, maybe they'll give us their domain so we get less miscommunication.
So, if somebody wanted to submit to Strand Magazine to be published, what advice would you give them in terms of making the inquiry to you or what they should be writing, or what would be your advice to someone who'd like to end up being published in your magazine?
It's a good point. The thing is this, when you publish a story, you have to nail the beginning down, get me interested within the first 15 seconds. Lead me into interest because if you lead me to be interested in the story, to feel invested in it, you can take me far and you have to nail the ending. It's like in gymnastics, land, you know, you have to once you dismount that vault, you have to nail the landing and you have
Yes.
to nail the end. You have to have it have either a twist, you have to have it have a great payoff, you have to have something that's unforgettable. So those are the main bits of advice I would give a writer. The other thing is if they purchase a copy of the magazine, they can do that, see what we publish. They can go to a library, leaf through the magazine, see what we publish. And above all, read some of the good short story people like Daphne du Maurier. She wrote fantastic short stories.
Yep.
Stanley Ellen, who unfortunately is hardly read anymore. He's one of the great, great, great writers who always knew how to nail that ending. Unforgettable stuff. And there's another late great who probably nobody knows, and his name was Hugh Walpole. And he wrote these wonderfully atmospheric ghost stories that always had a great payoff. And they were so readable and they just were so, you never like ever stopped to try to read a sentence again because everything had a smooth flow. And when a writer is editing their work, if you're ever looking at a sentence and your own sentence is confusing you, it's going to confuse the hell out of me. So you have to make that clear because when you start getting to the point where your work is confusing you a little, then you need to work on making it clear and making it clear to somebody who doesn't like you. You look at the editor as somebody who's not going to like you. Look at the editor as somebody who, how would you want to make it difficult for anybody to reject? How would you submit any story? And I'm giving this advice generally to anybody submitting a novel, a work of fiction. Always try to look at it from the editor's perspective.
Yep.
And I'm not like this. I'm always trying to find the positive in things. But look at the editor or look at the agent as somebody who's just full of work, full of manuscripts, and is just finding a reason to say no and
Yes.
find a way of giving them no reason to say no. Find a way not only of forcing them to say yes, but make it so professional, so clear, so smooth, so gripping that they'll get so absorbed in it and that no default will turn into a yes.
That's great advice, Andrew. Totally great advice.
Thank you.
Well, we have sort of run out of time, and I want to hold this up again. And if this interview has sparked your interest in the magazine, go to strandmag.com and check out their issues. Go to a bookstore, go to a magazine stand, or order the book and be in store for some great reading. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being here today. This was marvelous. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did as well.
I did, Rick, and I just want to say one thing, and I don't care if I'm going to embarrass you when I say this, but you were the guy who had the idea to write this, to have this book published. I remember I was having a chat with you and a couple of my friends at I think it was Greg and Anthony, and you said, Andrew, what are you doing for your 25th anniversary? And I said, well, we're putting out a special 25th anniversary issue. And you said, and no collection of stories? I said, well, actually, I didn't think of that. And you said, well, you need to put out a collection of stories for your 25th anniversary. So, Rick, I owe this all to you. And it's very humble of you not to point that out in the intro, by the way.
Oh, uh, Uh, well, and I want to thank you for being supportive of my writing as well. And you've been a very great supporter, written blurbs and published some of my stories and articles, I should say. And I love your
Well, you're a
magazine.
golden age writer today, which is very rare. It's like when I read your books, I said, "Oh my, this guy knows how to grab my attention, grab my interest." And I found I'm reading 30 pages and missing a meeting. And when I see that, I'm like, okay, this guy
Wow.
he knows how to write. This guy's
Well,
doing a good job of things. So you're doing great, and I hope you write another book.
actually, I have a third Scorpion book that's coming out a year from this month, next year, next in 27. And I can't reveal what it is, but there's going to be some very big news about it shortly.
Excellent. That's great, Rick.
Positive big news.
That's great, man.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and just keep doing what you're doing, and let's stay in touch.
Sounds good, Rick. Take care. Great to see you.
Same here.
Bye
Okay.
bye.
Bye-bye.